One of the most common phrases I come across in any discussions around coronavirus and beyond is the phrase, when we get back to normal. But the question never seems to be asked about what exactly is normal. What is comfortable for some people that's considered normal is actually extremely uncomfortable for others. So, do we really want to go back to that? And what would be normal if we talked about going forward to a normal rather than back? A useful point to remember is that in geometry, normal literally means 90 degrees on to something else. That's normal. That relationship is a 90-degree angle. So often I think of what's considered to be normal is actually sideways on from reality. Completely sideways on with no connection at all. There are huge issues that are not being addressed in the so-called current normal. And in reality, what's normal is just a mix of habit and wishful thinking. In terms of the sins of dubious discipline, which is in another video we discussed elsewhere, it's essentially what we call the golden age game. A refusal to face the present by looking only in the past or only in the future. There's a golden age in either direction. But to get to either of those, we've actually got to do some action now. So normal is often a way of avoiding actually facing what has to be done right now. And again, as in the previous video, we talked about belief. That when action starts or assumption starts with I know, the one thing we know we're in a high level of change is that we don't know. There is by definition something that we don't know. We have to deal with all of the unknown unknowns, all of the unknowns generally, and identify what we do and don't know, and be honest about it. If we cling to belief, we won't have the ability to sense what's actually going on. So a useful question here is, what kind of normal do we actually want? And often normal is actually essentially a feeling rather than an action, a state. One thing in fact normal is not, in a dynamic environment, normal is not a state. Things are changing all the time. And particularly what's happening now is we're dealing with major change in climate, in terms of health systems, in terms of international economics and logistics, in terms of politics and much, much more. There is no normal to go back to. We can only go forward to something which will be much more dynamic. And to get there, we need to get clear on what is the vision, what are we actually trying to do? What are the signals that will happen when we are in normal, so that we can keep adapting continually towards that normal. Because that vision then gives us values, which are tests, ways we can look at it, and principles, which are actual identifiers. It looks more like this, it looks more like that. These guide our actual decisions in terms of going towards or away from something that we would describe as normal. But again, it's going to be dynamic. So some classic themes of a comfortable normal would be the whole of the Maslow set. Things like enough food, some kind of relationship that actually works, some kind of sense of peace and comfort within ourselves. Again, dynamic, not static. Actualization, a sense of meaning and purpose, a sense of I fit within this world, I have a place here. So when we go into an organization and apply that same thinking, what would normal be within that organization? A very simple example that's changed for a lot of people, particularly in my kind of space, where I'm able to, quotes, work from home, where a lot of people aren't. But now I'm able to work from home, it's become the new normal. So what aspects of that actually work, what don't work? That new normal has a lot of isolation, a literal sense of no longer being in touch with the world. What do we need to do to make that work? To bring those elements together, to adapt continuously? And in organizations particularly, a useful approach is to say there is now how do we get to the next bit of new? When we get there, continually test. When we get to that new, that's our new now. Now goes to the new, now goes to the new, now goes to the new. So continually adapt, continually transform, continually work so that normal is something that is dynamic rather than static. That's the architectures that we need, is something that supports that rather than something that is fixed. Because if something's fixed, it'll already be out of date by the time things have changed.